My sister abandoned her newborn to chase a career in the city, but 19 years later, she showed up at his graduation with a cake and a real mom badge. She had no idea the storm she just walked into. You're tuned into Real Reddit Revenge, and today's story is a masterclass in why you should never try to reclaim a life you walked away from nearly 2 decades ago. My name is Alina Vance. I was 41 years old when my biological sister attempted to stage a hostile takeover of the son she handed over to me nearly 2 decades prior. Sierra got pregnant at 16. In our house, that wasn't just a mistake, it was a catastrophe. My parents absolutely lost their minds. They claimed a teenage pregnancy would drag the Vance name through the mud, torch Sierra's Ivy League dreams, and basically end life as we knew it. So they did what they always did. They dumped the problem on me. I was 22, barely out of college, single, and had literally never even held a diaper, let alone a newborn. I stepped up anyway. I raised that boy as a solo parent, grinding through 2 soul-crushing jobs during his toddler years. I remember wrapping his Christmas presents in the Sunday comics because wrapping paper was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was the only person in every single parent-teacher conference, year after year. Meanwhile, Sierra moved to Boston. She padded her resume, climbed the corporate ladder, snagged an MBA, got married twice, and didn't check in on her son a single time. Not one phone call. Then, the day arrived, high school graduation. Sierra sauntered into that gymnasium holding a bakery-style cake with "Congratulations from your real mom" written in icing. What went down at that ceremony made my mother break down in sobs, caused Sierra's latest boyfriend to dump her on the spot, and resulted in 200 total strangers giving a standing ovation to a woman they'd never met. But before we get into the fireworks, if you're a fan of stories about family loyalty and the moments that define who we are, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Real Reddit Revenge. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your neck of the woods. Let's go back 19 years to the 2:00 a.m. phone call that changed everything. I grew up in Clearwater, Ohio. Population 11,000. It's the kind of Midwest town where the neighbors know you failed your chemistry quiz before you even get home, and the guy at the local Kroger asks about your Nana's hip surgery while bagging your milk. My sister Sierra is 6 years my junior. She was always the golden child, the pretty one, the one who could walk into a room and have everyone eating out of the palm of her hand just by breathing. I was the other one, the reliable one who set the table, scrubbed the pans, and played chauffeur, driving Sierra to her elite dance classes every Tuesday and Thursday. My mother always said it was good practice for when I had my own family. I loved my sister. I want to make that crystal clear. I loved her with that complicated blend of big sister annoyance and fierce protection that you just can't pull apart. Our mother, Deanne, had a very simple mantra. Sierra was fragile. Sierra needed a safety net. Sierra was the one we had to worry about. I, on the other hand, was the fixer. I was the one who could handle the pressure, the one who didn't need a check-in because I'd always find a way to make it work. Our father, Arthur, just went along with whatever Diane decided. He wasn't a bad guy, just a ghost. He was physically there at the dinner table, but he checked out of every conversation that actually mattered. I was 22 that spring. I had just finished my undergrad in education at Ohio State. I'd been fast-tracked into a master's program with a full-ride scholarship. I had a 5-year plan, a strict timeline, and a tiny studio apartment with a view of a dumpster, and I loved it because it was mine. Sierra was 16, a sophomore in high school. She was dating a guy named Caleb who drove a beat-up Mustang and worked the late shift at the cinema. Then, that March night, the landline screamed at 2:00 a.m. It was my mother. I drove the 40 minutes back to my childhood home in the pitch black. Diane was sitting at the kitchen island with a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Arthur was leaning against the fridge, arms locked, staring a hole into the linoleum floor. I could hear Sierra upstairs, her muffled sobbing vibrating through the ceiling. Diane didn't even look up when I pulled out a chair. She just slid a grainy piece of paper across the table. An ultrasound. She was 4 months along. Sierra had hidden it for an entire semester. Diane's first words weren't about Sierra's health, or the baby, or the fact that Caleb had already blocked Sierra's number. Her first words were, "The neighbors can never find out about this." The kitchen clock ticked to 11 a.m. Arthur cleared his throat but stayed silent. Diane laid out the solutions like a general planning a raid. Option 1, adoption. But that involved a paper trail, and paper trails meant the town would talk. Option 2, Sierra keeps it. But Diane refused to have a teen mom under her roof. "It would ruin the reputation we've spent decades building," she said, as if she'd built an empire instead of just a manicured lawn and a social circle. Then she went to the linen closet and returned with a small, yellowed bundle. A baby blanket, 100% cotton, frayed at the hem. "This was yours," she said, thrusting it at me. "From when you were born." I held it. It was thin, smelling of cedar chests and old dust. Diane finally looked me in the eye. "You have to help us, Alina. You're her sister." The next morning, the ultimatum was delivered. If I didn't take the baby, they were calling an agency by Friday. The baby would be placed with strangers, Sierra would go back to her perfect life, and the secret would be buried. I asked the only question that mattered. What does Sierra want? Does she want to be a mother? Diane dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "Sierra is a child. She doesn't know what she wants." Arthur just nodded. He always nodded. I looked over at Sierra, who had finally crawled downstairs. She was swallowed up by a massive hoodie, her mascara smeared like war paint under her eyes. She looked exactly like what she was, a terrified 16-year-old girl whose life was spinning out of control. "Sierra," I said softly, "what do you want?" She looked at our mother, then at me, then at her shoes. "I just want it to go away," she whispered. Diane pointed at me triumphantly. "There, you heard her. She has school. She has her whole life ahead of her." I need you to hold on to that line, "she has school." Because 19 years later, in a gym packed with 200 people, those 4 words would come back to haunt her in a way she never saw coming. I drove back to my apartment that night with that yellow blanket in the passenger seat. I hadn't officially said yes, but in our family, if you didn't say no loud enough to shake the walls, it was taken as a yes. 2 weeks later, I called Diane and told her I'd do it. I withdrew from my master's program the very next morning. Leo was born on July 14th at 3:17 p.m. 6 pounds, 9 ounces, with a head of jet black hair and a set of lungs that could peel paint off the walls. I was in the delivery room. Sierra was there, obviously, doing the hard work. Diane stood by the exit, arms crossed, checking her watch every 10 minutes. Arthur stayed in the waiting room, probably finding a new spot on the floor to stare at. The labor lasted 11 hours. Sierra was tough, I'll give her that. She didn't cry out. She just gripped the rails and pushed when the monitors told her to. I watched her face and kept thinking, she's just a kid. When Leo finally arrived, the nurse cleaned him up and held him out. "Who wants to hold him first?" she asked. There were 3 of us in that room. Sierra turned her face to the wall. Diane didn't move a muscle. The nurse looked at me, puzzled. I took him, 6 pounds, 9 ounces. He was tiny. His eyes were closed, and his little fist immediately curled around my pinky finger. He stopped crying instantly, like he'd been waiting for the right arms to land in. The nurse asked who was taking the baby home. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. "I am," I finally said. 3 days later, I carried Leo into my 1-bedroom apartment on East Willow Street. I had a crib I'd borrowed from a girl at work, a pack of generic diapers, and that yellow blanket. I tucked him in that first night, the same fabric that had wrapped me 22 years ago. It barely covered him, but it was ours. That first year nearly ended me. Leo had brutal colic. He would scream for 4 straight hours every single night. I spent months walking laps in my tiny living room, humming half-remembered lullabies and praying for the sun to come up. I was working as a teacher's aide from 7:45 to 3:30. Then coming home to a high-needs infant. I learned how to live on 4 hours of broken sleep. I learned how to eat standing over the sink. I learned how to shower in 180 seconds flat, because that was the exact window of time Leo would sit in his bouncy chair without losing his mind. I called my mother once, around 11:00 p.m., after 3 hours of nonstop crying. I was standing in my kitchen in stained sweatpants, sobbing right along with him. "Mom, please, I just need one night of help," I begged. Diane's voice was ice cold. "You chose this path, Alina. You're an adult. Figure it out." Then she hung up. Meanwhile, Sierra moved to Boston that August. She'd been accepted into an expensive private college, her tuition fully covered by my parents' life savings. The same savings they told me couldn't be touched when I asked for help with Leo's pediatrician bills. In October, a judge in Franklin County granted me legal guardianship. The paperwork was cold and clinical. Sierra signed the relinquishment forms via fax from her dorm during sorority rush week. I tucked those papers into a fireproof safe under my bed, right next to that yellow blanket and Leo's hospital ID bracelet. He was mine. Legally. Finally. Completely. Let me give you the highlight reel of the next 5 years. Leo at age 1, his first steps. He wobbled from the coffee table to the sofa, 3 feet of pure courage, grinning like he'd just won the Super Bowl. I caught it on an old Motorola flip phone. I still have that grainy video. Leo at 2, his first word was ma. Not mommy, just ma. Short, direct, like he knew exactly who was in charge. Leo at 3, I started teaching part-time while a neighbor named Mrs. Gable watched him for $40 a week. Mrs. Gable had 6 grandkids and the patience of a saint. Leo adored her. Leo at 4, the kid could read. Not just Dr. Seuss, actual sentences. He read the back of the Cheerios box and asked me what riboflavin was. I had to Google it on my lunch break. Leo at 5, kindergarten. I stood outside those school gates for 20 minutes after the bell rang, just in case he needed me. He never looked back. He just marched in with his Spider-Man backpack, and I sat in my car and sobbed because I was so proud and so heartbroken at the same time. During those 5 years, not a single member of the Vance family visited. No Christmas gifts. No happy birthday cards. Diane would call once in a blue moon to ask if I was managing, but never to offer a dime. Arthur sent a $50 check for Leo's 3rd birthday with no note, just the check. On Christmas morning when Leo was 3, it was just us. I wrapped his toys in the Sunday funnies. He didn't care. He thought the colorful cartoons were part of the gift. When Leo turned 6, Sierra called. It was a random Tuesday. I was boiling pasta while Leo sat at the table drawing a T-Rex. The caller ID said Boston, MA. I almost ignored it, thinking it was a scammer. "Alina, it's Sierra." Her voice sounded different, expensive, polished, like she'd spent 4 years learning how to sound like someone important. She didn't ask how Leo was. She didn't ask if he liked school or if he still had those bad dreams. She asked about a 2003 Toyota Camry she'd left in our parents' garage 6 years ago. She wanted to sell it for extra cash for an apartment deposit. "The car is probably still there," I told her. "Great, I'll call Mom. Thanks, bye." 42 seconds, I timed it. I couldn't believe that was it. Later that night, Diane called. "Your sister is graduating top of her class in business. Don't make things difficult for her, Alina." "I'm not making things difficult," I snapped. "I'm making dinner." Sierra graduated summa cum laude from Emerson the following May. Deanne and Arthur drove all the way to Boston for the ceremony. They had her professional graduation portrait framed, 18 by 24, custom matted, and hung it in their living room like a shrine. Leo's first day of school photo was stuck to my fridge with a ladybug magnet. It wasn't in their house at all. When Leo was 8, 2 things happened that shifted my world. First, the high school offered me a full-time spot as a special Eid coordinator, provided I finished my degree. The salary was $43,000. For a single mom who'd been clipping coupons just to buy milk, that felt like winning the lottery. Second, Leo asked me a question while I was doing the dishes. "Aunt Alina, how come I don't have a mom and dad like the other kids?" The water kept running. A plate slipped from my hand and clattered into the sink. He was sitting right behind me, pencil in hand, looking at me with those dark, soulful eyes that were way too perceptive for an 8-year-old. I shut off the tap, dried my hands, and sat down. "Leo, I love you more than anything. Your birth mother loves you too, in her own way. But I'm the one who's here, and I'm the one who's always going to be here." He scanned my face like he was reading a book. "I know. he said quietly. "I just wanted to know if I could call you Mom instead of Aunt Alina. Is that okay?" I hadn't cried in years, not when my mother turned her back on us, not when Sierra called about a car instead of her child. But when that little boy asked for permission to call me Mom, I crumbled. He walked around the table and hugged me so tight. He smelled like grape juice and pencil shavings. "It's okay, Mom," he said, for the first time. That night, I wanted to call Diane. I wanted to tell her, "Your grandson just called me Mom, and it's the best day of my life." But I didn't. I knew she'd tell me I was confusing him. She'd tell me I was overstepping my bounds. Instead, I pulled out the fireproof safe and read those guardianship papers again. My name, Alina Rose Vance, legal guardian. Sierra's signature, relinquishing all custodial rights. Stamped, filed, final. Underneath the papers was the yellow blanket. Leo had carried it everywhere until he was 5. It was frayed, missing half its stitching, and smelled like baby shampoo. I was still holding it when I heard a knock. Leo was in his dinosaur pajamas. "Mom, I can't sleep." "Me neither," I said. He climbed into bed and saw the blanket. "That's my baby blanket," he whispered. He hadn't seen it in years. "It was mine first," I told him, "long before it was yours." He studied the edges, then folded it with a weird amount of care for an 8-year-old. "We should keep this safe," he said. "It's important." He had no idea how right he was. I told Leo the whole truth when he was 13. We were on the porch on a Sunday. He'd been asking, circling questions for months. Why did Grandma Diane always introduce him as Sierra's son? Why were there no baby pictures in the family albums? So I laid it all out. The 2:00 a.m. call. The ultimatum. The 40-minute drive in the dark. I told him Sierra was 16 and scared. I gave him the facts, no drama, no insults. I just told him his biological mother hadn't called or visited in 13 years. Leo listened in total silence. When I finished, he just went to his room and shut the door. He didn't come out for 2 days. On the 3rd morning, he sat down for breakfast like nothing had happened. "I'm not mad at her," he said, taking a bite of eggs. "At Sierra?" I asked. "At any of them. I'm just sad for her. She missed everything." Then he went to school. I sat there for 20 minutes, still holding the spatula, trying to breathe. Leo didn't stop calling me Mom. He didn't ask to meet Sierra. He just kept being himself, brilliant, awkward, and growing 3 inches that summer. And he remained entirely and forever mine. While I was pouring every ounce of my physical and emotional energy into the daily, often invisible labor of raising Leo, my sister Sierra was busy curating a life that looked perfect in 1200 pixel resolution. She didn't just live a life. She engineered a brand. She collected accomplishments like high-end charms on a designer bracelet, each one carefully chosen to signal her status to a world that didn't know her secrets. There was the MBA from Northwestern, a feat my mother, Diane, announced to our entire social circle as if it were a royal coronation that justified every sacrifice our family had ever made. By 28, Sierra was a marketing director at a boutique agency in Chicago. She had the corner office with a view of the skyline, the company-leased Audi, and a wardrobe of power suits that made her look like she had never encountered a dirty diaper or a sleepless night in her life. Her LinkedIn was a masterpiece of professional triumph, a polished facade that hid the hollow spaces where a sister and a mother should have been. She also collected marriages with the same efficiency she used for her quarterly KPIs. The first one lasted 2 years. His name was Brett. I never met him. I only saw him in a single framed photo on my mother's mantle. A man with perfectly bleached teeth and a sweater draped over his shoulders like an accessory. The second lasted 14 months. His name was Marco. I never met him either. Each time Sierra's carefully constructed life fractured into a divorce, the phone would ring in my small, cluttered kitchen in Willow Creek. It was never Sierra calling to apologize for the silence or to check if the nephew she had discarded was still breathing. It was always Diane, acting as the primary PR agent for the golden child. Diane didn't call to ask how Leo was doing. She didn't call to hear about what Sierra's son had scored on his latest math test or the fact that he had made the honor roll for the 4th time in a row. She didn't want to hear about the quiet, steady boy he was becoming. No, Diane called to issue an edict of silence and demand a specific type of emotional labor from me. "Your sister is going through a hard time, Alina," Diane said after divorce number 2, her voice sharp with a protective instinct she had never once directed toward me. "She's incredibly fragile right now. She doesn't need judgment from anyone right now." "I haven't spoken to Sierra in 3 years, Mom," I reminded her, standing in my kitchen with a stack of grating and a sink full of dishes. "Good, keep it that way. Let her heal." That was the Vance family logic. Sierra's pressure and her healing were the family's priority, while my struggle to keep the lights on and a small boy fed was simply what was expected of the reliable one. My sister got married twice and divorced twice, and neither time did she send Leo a birthday card. July 14th came and went, year after year, and the mailbox stayed empty. No card, no call, no text. The post office knew my address, she just did not use it. She had deleted us from her narrative to ensure there were no complications in her climb to the top. Meanwhile, I was living in the quiet, gritty reality of building a life from the wreckage. I completed my master's degree, a journey that took me 4 long years of night classes while working full-time and raising Leo. I graduated when Leo was 8 years old. It was a muggy Ohio afternoon, and the air in the auditorium smelled like floor wax and cheap perfume. I looked out into the crowd as I walked across that stage, seeing a sea of proud families, but the Vance seats were empty. No one from my family attended my graduation either. Claire Reeves, a colleague who had become my closest friend and my real support system, sat in the 3rd row and cheered loud enough for 10 people. She was the one who saw the work I put in when no one else was looking. I became the special education coordinator at Willow Creek High School the following year. It was a position of authority, a role where I finally felt like I was making a difference. No one called to congratulate me, but that was fine. I had stopped waiting for that phone call around year 4. I had realized that in the Vance hierarchy, I was the placeholder, and placeholders don't get applause. The Thanksgiving when Leo was 15 was the first time I brought him to my parents' house in years. I do not know why I agreed to go. Maybe I thought things had finally changed. Maybe I wanted Leo to have the big table holiday experience at least once. Maybe I was tired of pretending the Summers family did not exist. We drove the 40 minutes to Willow Creek. Leo wore a button-down shirt he had picked out himself. He was nervous. I could tell because he kept adjusting his collar in the passenger seat mirror, checking his reflection to see if he looked like he belonged. The house was full. Diane had invited cousins, an aunt, and 2 neighbors. The table was set for 14. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, a normal Thanksgiving, the kind you see in movies. Diane met us at the door. She hugged Leo, a brief, performative gesture that lacked any real warmth. Then she walked him into the dining room and introduced him to a cousin he had never met. "Everyone, this is Sierra's son, Leo," she announced. Not Alina's son. Not our grandson, who Alina has been raising single-handedly for 15 years. Not even just Leo. In my mother's house, I was merely a temporary steward, and Leo was an asset belonging to the golden child who wasn't even there. Leo's hand found mine under the table. He squeezed. 15 years old, and he understood the dynamic better than anyone in that room. He saw the way they looked at him, as a curiosity, a secret that had finally been let out of the box for a holiday display. Arthur carved the turkey. Diane poured the wine. No one asked Leo about school, about his grades, or about the science fair project that had won 2nd place at the state level. No one asked me about anything at all. After dessert, Diane cornered me in the kitchen while she was loading the dishwasher. "It was nice of you to bring him," she said, her voice casual. "Sierra would be glad to know he's doing well." "Then maybe Sierra should ask him herself," I said. Diane gave me the look, the one that said I was being difficult again. We drove home in silence. Leo was the one who broke it first. "I don't need to go back there, Mom." Leo's junior year was when I realized he was not just smart, he was remarkable. Straight A's since freshman year, AP classes stacked 3 deep, debate team captain, and a volunteer tutor at the community center every Saturday morning. His teachers stopped me in the hallway to say things like gifted and exceptional, and have you considered early college admission? I had considered nothing except making sure he ate dinner every night and had clean clothes for school. Everything else, the grades, the ambition, the quiet discipline, that was all Leo. His college counselor called me in for a meeting in October of his senior year. "Leo is on track to be valedictorian," she said, her voice filled with pride. "His essay is one of the strongest I've read in 20 years. I asked what the essay was about. She slid a printed copy across the desk. The title was centered at the top in 12-point Times New Roman, "The Woman Who Chose Me." I read it in the school parking lot because I could not read it in front of another human being. I sat in my Honda with the engine off and the windows up, and I read every word. He wrote about the night I brought him home from the hospital, about the yellow blanket, about learning to ride a bike in the parking lot of our apartment complex because we did not have a driveway, about the Christmas mornings with newspaper wrapping paper, about the night he asked to call me Mom and I cried. He wrote, "Biology is an accident. Love is a decision. My mother made that decision every single day for 19 years and she never once asked for credit." I sat in that car for 20 minutes before I could drive. The parking lot emptied around me. The sun went down. I held that essay against the steering wheel and I let myself feel every single year, the exhaustion, the isolation, and the absolute love that had carried us through. 2 months before graduation, the illusion was finally shattered. Leo came home from school on a Wednesday and set his phone on the kitchen counter, screen up. "Mom, you need to see this." It was a family group text. Diane, Arthur, Sierra, Aunt Patris, Uncle Dale. Someone had added Leo to the thread by accident. Probably Diane, who could barely operate her phone on a good day. The messages went back 2 years. I scrolled through them, sitting at the kitchen table while Leo stood by the window, arms crossed, watching me. Diane, 14 months ago. "When Sierra is ready, she will take Leo back. Alina is just keeping him for now." Sierra, 3 days later. "Give me a couple more years. I'm getting my life together." Uncle Dale. "Alina should be grateful she got to have a kid at all." I read every message twice. My hands were steady because they had to be. For 2 years, my family had been discussing the return of my son like he was a borrowed lawnmower. Like I was storing him temporarily until Sierra was ready to pick him up. I set the phone down and looked at Leo. "Why didn't you show me this sooner?" "Because I didn't want you to lose them," he said, "even though they don't deserve you." 17 years old, standing in my kitchen protecting me from my own family. I did not call Diane. I did not call Sierra. I did not scream or cry. I went to the bedroom, opened the fireproof safe, and checked the guardianship papers. Every page, every signature, every notarized stamp was in order. Then I closed the safe and went back to making dinner. That night, Leo and I sat on the porch. "Why didn't you tell me when you first saw the messages?" I asked again. "Because you would have confronted Grandma," he said, "and then she would have cut you off completely. And even though she doesn't treat you right, I know you still love her. I didn't want to be the reason you lost your mom." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that Diane had lost the right to be called my mom years ago, but the truth was more complicated than that. "Leo, you and I are a family. Whatever they think, whatever they plan, it does not change what is legally and actually true. You are my son." He nodded. "I know, I've always known." 6 weeks before graduation, Diane called with news. She did not ask about Leo's valedictorian announcement. She called to talk about Sierra. "Your sister has met someone, Harrison Whitfield. He's in real estate. Very successful, very traditional. He wants a family, Alina, a real family." I leaned against the kitchen counter and listened. Sierra told him about Leo, about how complicated things were, about how the family situation forced her to make a difficult choice. "What choice was that?" I asked. "You know what I mean, the choice to let you help." Let me help. That was how my mother described 19 years of solo parenthood. "Harrison is very moved. He thinks Sierra is brave. He wants to meet Leo. This could be Sierra's chance, Alina. Her chance to finally have everything she deserves. Her chance, not Leo's chance to know his biological mother. Not a chance for the family to heal. Not a chance for me to get recognition. Sierra's chance." "Harrison doesn't know the full story, does he?" I said. "He knows what he needs to know. He doesn't know she signed away her rights by fax during rush week. Do not ruin this for her. I hung up and sat on the porch steps for 30 minutes, watching the street lights come on. 3 weeks later, Leo came into the kitchen holding his phone. She messaged me. It was an Instagram DM from Sierra. "Hey, handsome, I'm your bio mom. I've thought about you every single day. I would love to meet you. I'm coming to town soon." Followed by heart emojis. I read it twice. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," Leo said. He sat down and typed a reply. "Hi, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate you thinking of me." Short, polite, cool, no mom. No heart emojis. Sierra replied within 90 seconds. "Can't wait to see you at graduation. I'm bringing someone special I want you to meet." I thought about Sierra at 16 signing papers by fax and Sierra at 35 typing. I've thought about you every day. Same person, same avoidance. 6 weeks before graduation, the school made it official. Leo Summers, valedictorian, class of 2026. I got the call between periods. He would give the address 5 to 7 minutes. He could choose his own topic. That evening, I told him. He smiled. "I already started writing the speech," he said. "Can I read it?" "Not yet. You'll hear it at the ceremony." For the next 6 weeks, I heard him practicing behind his closed bedroom door. Reading, pausing, rewriting. I bought a new dress, navy blue and simple. Leo ironed his own shirt. He had been ironing his own clothes since he was 14. I taught him, and he was better at it than I was. The phone call came 9 days before graduation. "Sierra will be at the ceremony," Diane said. "She's bringing Harrison. They're flying in from Chicago. Do not make a scene, Alina. This is an important day for Sierra." I held the phone away from my ear. An important day for Sierra, not for Leo, the one graduating. Not for me, the one who helped him with homework every night for 13 years. "She's bringing a cake," Diane added. "Something special to celebrate." I hung up and sat on the porch. It was May, and the air smelled like cut grass. Leo came out with lemonade and sat next to me. "She's coming," I said. "I know. With Harrison, I figured. Are you okay with that?" He looked at me with dark, steady eyes. "Mom, I have been okay for a long time. I was okay when I was 8 and asked to call you Mom. I was okay when I was 13 and you told me the truth. I was okay when I read the group chat. I'm okay now. She can bring whoever she wants. It won't change anything." Graduation morning. I woke at 5:30, made coffee, and watched the sun rise. Leo's cap and gown were hanging on the back of the chair. I had pressed them with the iron on low heat, the way my mother taught me. Leo came downstairs at 7:00, dressed in a white button-down and dark slacks. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Hungry." We ate breakfast in a comfortable silence. The morning light hit the salt shaker, throwing a small rainbow across the table. "Can I see the speech?" I asked one more time. Leo smiled. "Not yet, Mom. You'll hear it with everyone else." He stood up, adjusted his cap, and we headed toward the school. Sierra was coming with her millionaire boyfriend and a real mom, Cake, ready to perform for an audience that no longer existed. She had no idea that Leo had spent 6 weeks writing a script she hadn't rehearsed. I sat in the front row, clutching my purse. Sierra walked in with Harrison, looking like she owned the world. She had no idea her world was about to end. "You'll hear it," Leo had said from the 3rd row of the auditorium of our memories. After breakfast on that final morning, he had retreated to his room to finish getting ready, leaving me in the quiet of a kitchen that had seen 19 years of morning light. I washed the dishes, dried them, and put them away with a mechanical precision, my mind racing through 2 decades of milestones. When I finally went to get dressed and came back downstairs, Leo was standing in the hallway, adjusting his graduation cap in the mirror. I noticed something in his hand. It was small, yellow, and carefully folded. My breath hitched. It was the blanket, the yellow baby blanket from 19 years ago. The edges were frayed, the stitching was missing in places, and the fabric was thin from years of being held, but there it was. He was tucking it into the inside pocket of his graduation vest, right over his heart. He saw me watching him through the glass and held my gaze in the mirror. "For good luck," he said, and then he smiled, that steady, soulful smile that belonged to him and him alone. I didn't ask anything else. I simply picked up my car keys and we left. Claire was meeting us at the school, and the gymnasium was only 20 minutes away, but in my chest, it felt like a journey to a courtroom where a final verdict was about to be read. The gymnasium at Willow Creek High School holds 400 people, and that day, every single seat was taken. There were rows of plastic chairs on the gym floor, a small stage at the front with a weathered podium, and a banner that proudly read Class of 2026. The school orchestra was tuning in the corner, 3 violins, a cello, 2 flutes, and a kid with a tuba who looked like he wished he were anywhere else on earth. Claire and I found seats in the 3rd row, left side, close enough to see the podium and the light in Leo's eyes when he walked. I smoothed my navy dress and folded my hands in my lap, trying to steady the trembling I felt deep in my bones. Then, the double doors at the back of the gym swung open. Sierra walked in like she was entering a gala, not a high school graduation. She wore an emerald green wrap dress that screamed Chicago corporate, her auburn hair falling in loose waves past her shoulders, and heels that clicked with an arrogant rhythm on the hardwood floor. Harrison was beside her in a sharp gray suit, his silver watch catching the overhead lights. He carried himself with the heavy confidence of a man who considers purchasing rooms he enters. Behind them were Diane and Arthur. Diane wore a floral blouse and the special occasion lipstick she only pulled out for high-profile events. And in Diane's hands, resting on a plastic tray with a paper doily, was a cake. It was a grocery store bakery cake, white frosting with bright pink lettering, likely ordered with 24 hours' notice. It read, "Congratulations from your real mom." 200 people were in that room, families, students, neighbors, and my mother was walking down the center aisle carrying a cake that claimed my son belonged to someone else. I did not move. I did not speak. Claire reached over and squeezed my hand, anchoring me to the chair. Before the ceremony could even start, Sierra made her move. She walked straight to the staging area where the graduates were lining up. Security didn't stop her because she flashed that practiced, winning smile at the volunteer parent and said, "I'm Leo Summers's mother." And technically, biologically, she wasn't lying. I watched from my seat as she found Leo in the line and pulled him into a full, theatrical embrace, arms wrapped tight, head tilted back so everyone could see her motherly joy. Leo stood rigid, his arms staying at his sides, a statue in a cap and gown. Then Sierra turned and walked toward me, her heels clicking like a countdown. She stopped at the end of my row and leaned in, her voice loud enough for the people behind us to catch every word. "Elena, thank you so much for taking care of my son all these years. You have been an incredible babysitter." She paused, placing a condescending hand on my shoulder. "But I'm here now. I'll take it from here." Babysitter, 19 years, 4,000 school lunches, 300 parent-teacher conferences, 11,000 bedtime stories, 16 years of homework help, 19 birthday cakes that I baked myself because a bakery cake cost $40 and that was a week of groceries for us. I did not respond. I didn't respond because I saw Leo watching us from the staging area. His jaw was tight, his eyes locked onto mine with a message that was louder than Sierra's voice. "Wait for me." So I waited. The ceremony began at 10:00 sharp. The superintendent gave a speech filled with sports metaphors that lasted 12 minutes too long. Then the graduates began crossing the stage. One by one, handshake, smile, photograph. Sierra had moved to the 2nd row, directly in front of me, recording everything on her phone. Every time a student passed, she whispered to Harrison, looking like a woman who believed every lie she had ever told him about her brave sacrifice. Diane sat at the end of the row, guarding that cake like it contained state secrets. Leo Summers. The name rang through the gym and everything else disappeared. The crowd, the cake, the emerald dress, it all fell away. Leo walked across the stage, tall and steady. He received his diploma, shook the principal's hand, and then looked down at me in the 3rd row. He winked. Instead of sitting back down, he walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone, his voice clear and calm, just as I had taught him when he was 12 and terrified of book reports. "Good morning," he said. He started with the usual jokes, the cafeteria mystery meet, the substitute teachers. The crowd laughed. Sierra laughed loudest, her hand on Harrison's arm. Then Leo paused. He looked down at his prepared notes for 5 seconds. Slowly, deliberately, he folded the paper and tucked it away. He began speaking without notes, his voice dropping into a register of raw honesty. "I've been planning this speech for 6 weeks," Leo said. "I wrote 9 drafts, but I realized this morning that the most important thing I want to say isn't on any of those pages." The gymnasium went into a particular kind of silence, the kind that happens when 200 people realize the script has been tossed out. Sierra straightened her posture, smiling at her phone. She thought he was about to talk about her. She was preparing for her moment. "The person I want to thank most today," Leo said, "is not a teacher or a coach. It's a woman who was 22 years old when she was handed a newborn baby and told, 'This is your responsibility now.' She had never changed a diaper. She had just been accepted into a master's program with a full scholarship, and she gave it up the next morning without hesitation." He let the words settle. "She moved into a 1-bedroom apartment and figured it out, teaching assistant salary, dollar store diapers. She wrapped my Christmas presents in newspaper because she couldn't afford wrapping paper." Somewhere in the back, a mother sniffed. "She went back to school when I was 5. Night classes, 4 years. She graduated with a master's in special education, and nobody from her family came to her ceremony. One friend sat in the 3rd row and cheered loud enough for 10 people. Claire squeezed my hand so hard I lost feeling in my fingers. She taught me to cook, to iron a shirt to look people in the eye. She came to every assembly, every play. She never missed one." Sierra was no longer smiling. Her phone had dropped to her lap. She was looking at Leo with an expression of pure, dawning fear. Leo looked directly at me. "She is not the woman who gave birth to me," he said, his voice ringing with an unbreakable strength. "But she is the woman who chose me every single day for 19 years without asking for anything in return. Her name is Alina Vance. She is my mother." The gymnasium erupted. 200 people stood up, clapping, some wiping their eyes. I sat in my plastic chair, tears running down my face, my hands finally shaking. Sierra sat 2 rows ahead, her phone recording the ceiling. Harrison was looking at her, then at me, then at the stage, the numbers finally adding up in his head. Diane sat at the end of the row, the real mom cake on her lap, the pink lettering now looking like a cruel joke. The ceremony ended, and the drama spilled out onto the grass. Sierra found me near the oak tree, her mascara smudging. Harrison trailed behind her, his mouth a thin line. "What was that?" Sierra's voice was sharp. "What did you tell him to say? You coached him. You turned my own son against me." Leo appeared behind her, still in his gown. "Nobody coached me," he said. "I wrote that speech myself. I'm not your noble sacrifice, Sierra. I'm a human being you walked away from." He looked at Diane, who was still clutching the cake 10 feet away. "And Grandma, you said today was Sierra's chance. But this is my graduation, not her audition." Harrison stepped forward, his voice low and controlled. "Vanessa, Sierra, whatever your name is today, you told me you were forced to give him up. You said the family situation was complicated." "Harrison, it was," Sierra cried. "Did you sign away your parental rights voluntarily?" Harrison asked, his eyes cold and precise. Sierra looked to Diane for rescue, but Diane was silent. Harrison didn't need another word. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his watch, and walked across the grass to the parking lot. I heard his car start, a clean, expensive sound, and watched it pull away, leaving Sierra standing in her emerald dress, watching the only man who ever made her want to be a mother drive away because he realized she never was one. The cake sat on the grass where Diane had set it down. Nobody would ever touch it. In the silence, I saw something in my mother's face for one fleeting second, regret. She opened her mouth and I thought, this is it, the apology. "Alina," Diane said, her lip trembling, "if you hadn't poisoned him against his own mother, none of this would have happened." And just like that, the moment was gone. The regret collapsed back into the fortress of righteousness she had lived in for decades. Leo looked at her, not with anger, but with the patience you show someone who simply cannot hear. "Grandma, I'm 19. I have eyes and ears. I have 19 years of memories. Do you know how many of them include you? 7 Thanksgivings and 1 birthday card. Do you know how many include Mom? He gestured toward me. All of them, every single one. He turned to Sierra, who was standing 3 feet away, trembling. I'm not trying to hurt you. If you want to be in my life, you can be. But you start from now. Not from a cake, and not from an Instagram post when you don't even know what I'm allergic to. What? What are you allergic to? Sierra whispered. Tree nuts, Leo said. Since I was 4. Mom figured it out at a birthday party and did 60 and a 35 to get me to the ER. She sat in the waiting room for 4 hours praying while you were in Chicago. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the small, yellow, faded blanket. He held it up for a moment, then walked to me and placed it in my palm. This is yours, Mom. It was always yours. I held that blanket, thin as tissue, smelling of cedar and 19 years of being someone's whole world. I could not speak. My son had said it all. As Sierra stood alone on the grass and Diane pulled Arthur toward the car without looking back, I realized that the babysitter had finally finished her job. My son was a man, and he knew exactly who had built him.